Every day, we're here for you. We get things off the ground, keeping you connected. We're here keeping you safe and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. Every day, we're here. ARA. Here for you. Here for good.
Welcome to Everyday Greatness, and thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Barnaby Howarth. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. One of the proudest things I can say about myself is that I am Australian. So this acknowledgement comes straight from my heart, and I want to sincerely thank our Indigenous brothers and sisters for sharing their land with us. We're coming to you from Sydney Swans HQ in Moore Park, and today I'll be joined by the Chief Operating Officer of the Sydney Swans and former coach of the Moore Park Tigers, Drew Arthurson, and former Populous sports architect, Warwick Chalmers.
Great to be with you, Barnaby.
Likewise.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Warwick.
It's an invitation.
We'll be talking about how Populous designed the physical building that not only contains Swans HQ, but also highlights the emotional and cultural elements that underpin the Sydney Swans Football Club. Drawing emotions out of a person through the design of a physical structure isn't that difficult. Awe, wonder, anger, disgust, and enchantedness are all some of the reactions people can get from looking at an artwork or a completed construction. But building emotions into a physical structure is an entirely different kettle of fish. But that's exactly what Populous and Warwick Chalmers have done at Swans HQ. And today I'm excited to be sitting down with two of the key players in making this building we're sitting in today what it is today. When the Sydney Swans wanted to create a new home for themselves that was an inclusive space for the men's and women's football teams and the boys and girls academy footballers that helped enhance connectivity between coaches, players and staff, and also offered spaces for community engagement, they needed expert help. So they reached out to Populous, a global design firm with over 40 years experience and $60 billion worth of completed projects under their belt. And Populous sent in their big guns. They enlisted Senior Principal Warwick Chalmers, who joined a specialised team to blend the contemporary functionality required by elite sports teams with the timeless charm of the Royal Hall of Industries in Moore Park, while also honouring the deep, intangible pieces that make up the puzzle that is the Sydney Swans Football Club. Swans HQ is much more than just an office for staff and a gym for players. The building houses recovery pools, a dining area, outdoor terraces and sleeping pods, and is also a vibrant hub for members and fans on match day. And a lot of the spaces can also be hired out by community groups and business. To tell us all how it was achieved so spectacularly, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome to Everyday Greatness, Drew Arthurson and Warwick Chalmers. Drew and Warwick, thank you for joining me and welcome to Everyday Greatness.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us in, Barnaby.
Yes, likewise, Barnaby.
Nice to see you, Warwick.
Likewise, Drew.
So let's start at the start. Let's start with the brief. What was the brief that Populous received from the Swans, Warwick?
Well, I received a phone call from the great Dean Moore, who's obviously a great club stalwart, who's said, Warwick, can you come down for a meeting in Sydney? We want to talk about a new facility. You know, so I came down and met Dean and Andrew Ireland, and they said, look, it's time for a new facility. We're kind of busting at the seams here. Our facilities are kind of behind the other kind of AFL clubs. But we're struggling to find a site, obviously kind of finding, we want to keep ideally kind of in the Moore Park region or even in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, but obviously finding a kind of AFL-sized field with a room for a kind of training facility in the eastern suburbs of Sydney is quite difficult. So they identified, to their credit, they identified the Royal Hall of Industries, which is just down the road from the SCG and where they were. And they said, they didn't use the word crazy, but they said, we've kind of got this left field idea that maybe we could retrofit that. And I was like, oh, okay. So we, after we kind of had a half-hour meeting, we kind of went down and had a look at the building. And I was like, oh, wow, this is good. This could be an amazing opportunity. So from there, we did some briefing sessions in terms of, the standard kind of briefing sessions in terms of just kind of defining the areas and what the spaces that the Swans need, what they currently have, what ideally they want. And then we went away and kind of did a design. And initially I just said, oh, this is just going to be too good. This is too good to be true. When we start kind of laying out the plans, it's either going to be too big or too small, and we're going to be talking ourselves into kind of thinking that this is a good venue. But we actually did a layout and we actually went, wow, this actually kind of fits quite well, actually. And, it even had room for a kind of expansion over time and things to do. So once we did that, and then we did a 3 to 4 month kind of concept plan. And, at the end of that kind of exercise, we realised that, it was really quite viable to use the Royal Industries as their new HQ.
So you thought it was viable. Drew, you arrived in 2020 at the club and work was well underway. What were your initial thoughts on the scale and achievability of Swans HQ?
It's a great question, Barnaby. So the club was successful in tendering to secure a long-term lease for this facility. So Warwick's early stage work with Dean and Andrew and the team was integral in that. In between that first meeting or meetings that Warwick described and COVID was a time when the tender process ran and the club was successful in securing the lease. So planning was underway 2018-19, getting shovel ready, as we describe it. But work actually hadn't commenced when COVID hit. And you might have had previous interviewees on your great show that talked about the club trying to survive COVID. So being candid, and we were a month off not making payroll, and the club was in dire straits in March and April 2020. So one of the first things that I was part of reluctantly was actually writing to the Premier, speaking to her team at the time, and saying we need to terminate this deal. So it was one of the most difficult commercial decisions that I've been part of. Warwick was in the middle of that with us on many, many phone calls and VCs. And the hardest decision we had to make at that time, with great uncertainty about our business, was actually cancelling this project. So by April 2020, I'd say Warwick, 5, 6, 7 years of incredible hard work,
yes.
countless hours,
yes.
and incredible vision, Barnaby. We'd actually, with a couple of pen strokes but a very heavy heart, actually cancelled that. So that was my first 3 months at the club. Welcome to the club. Try and help us, with many others, navigate COVID and cancel this great project. So my first answer to your question, mate, is by April 2020, we didn't have a project. And not only was the uncertainty of the club quite stark, we also had terminated our hopes and dreams of having a new home.
So following on from that, how did it get back up and running once you'd signed the cancellation? How to get back up and running?
Yeah, so we'd reserve the rights to re-enliven the project should we stabilise in the future. So it's a really good question. We essentially put Warwick and the FTC team on ice and said, guys, just stay tuned, okay? That we don't want the vision to be dead. We had to exit because we didn't know if we'd survive. So we had a 3-phase plan at the footy club. Survive, reset our business, and then return to thrive, okay? So 2020 was about survive. By December and January 2020, we'd survived. And I remember sitting in Northern Rivers Caravan Park on some early video conferences with state government reps, Tom and I and a few others, on re-enlivening the project. And so we spent probably 6 months renegotiating, planning, working our way through what re-enlivening the project was, step one. And then step two is how do we phase the works as we recover as a footy club, as our cash flows recover, working with Warwick and FTC to actually bring it back to life. So probably, mate, by the end of 2020, early 2021, we had certainty that the project was back. And then it was about, okay, from a project phasing and vision point of view, how can we bring it back? What needs to stay the same? What also do we need to change to represent what the new Sydney Swans Football Club is post-COVID?
That's a pretty incredible story. Now, Warwick, before all of this cancellation talk and the Swans struggle to afford to get the project up and running, did you ever walk in here and think, these guys are kidding themselves? There's no way we'll be able to achieve that.
No, not really. I'm always up for a challenge.
Be honest, Warwick.
No. I mean, I think I kind of spoke to you earlier about it. It was kind of like a once-in-a-career opportunity to do this. So, no, like as I said, I think once we kind of did the layouts and whatever, I mean, it's an old building, so you don't know what skeletons are in the closet, not literally, but in terms of just the capacity of the building. And look, we kind of encountered a couple of those things during the design and the early stage of construction, like the roof, the integrity of the roof, and if it had any kind of contaminated materials in there and so forth. But we kind of worked our way through that. There's a few challenges, but nothing out of the ordinary. So, look, I think we were always kind of confident once we kind of laid out stuff, and then we realised, okay, well, the pool, that needs to go outside, but there was some room for that. That kind of fitted, and then we kind of did the layout, and working with the Swans was great, from Dean through to the football department. John and the team are great. We're really engaged, so we kind of worked through layouts really quickly, and they were really engaged and gave us kind of great feedback, so we can kind of move on. So, not until I think we had we were really happy with the layout and the way it was progressing, and then kind of COVID struck, literally, right when we were ready to get the shovels out, all the contractors were. So I don't think we ever had any thoughts. We just were really grateful that this was a building and we could kind of make it work. I mean, even it was almost like it was meant to be. I mean, even the central field where the indoor field is was the perfect dimensions for indoor field. I mean, like it's 60 by 30 if the right height. I mean, so if you go to a lot of these kind of new greenfield AFL facilities like Carlton, West Coast, their kind of indoor field was about 60 by 30 or thereabouts. So by virtue of the fact that you had this right in the middle, it was just signs like that to me kind of suggested that this was just meant to be, and this has got kind of great kind of potential. And my biggest challenge was making, and I used to say this to the Swans all the time, my biggest fear was not kind of reaching the potential of the building. That was my biggest fear about the project, not making it work, just making sure the potential was reached.
To the point of the destiny, just one quick aside, Barnaby. Warwick mentioned something really interesting. The analogies even between when the building was first opened in 1913, soon after it became a Spanish flu recovery centre. And so there's incredible parallels between that and our COVID days. Actually moving back in. It was actually a century gap.
That's
so,
right. The irony wasn't lost on us.
It was manifest, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's quite funny. Now, speaking of intangible things, did you ever doubt, Drew, that Populous was going to be able to incorporate the Bloods culture into a physical structure?
Good question. I haven't had that before, Barnaby. Short answer, no. I'll give you a medium to longer answer.
Far away.
So short answer, no. One thing that impressed me about Warwick and Henry and the team at Populous, and equally with the team at FDC and Anthony Murphy from the project management side, was how much they felt like part of the family. Firstly, so I think from a culture, values, work ethic perspective, there was very strong alignment there, and that impressed me from early days when I joined the football club, and I was very late to this party, by the way. So I was really fortunate in that respect. But the other reason that gave me confidence was Warwick and the team had done first-rate work with high-performance organisations above and beyond the Sydney Swans. So their domestic and international chops were well established. And so I got the sense, and had certainly heard from Andrew Ireland and Tom Harley and others coming into the job, that they were doing the best to not only internalise the Swans culture and ways of working into their design, but secondly, leveraging the work that they'd undertaken overseas. So I felt that we were bringing the best of both our organisation, what we could bring to bear, but equally what Populous had done and learnt with amazing organisations overseas, and bring them to this home here.
Very good. So let's talk about the hows, Warwick.
Yep.
Practically, what did Populous design to maintain the integrity of a historically significant building while also creating a cutting-edge elite sports centre?
Well, it probably comes down to our philosophy. From the get-go, we said, okay, look, this is not a greenfield site where we have to kind of do something architecturally clever or whatever like that. The building is the hero. And that was like one of our kind of mantras from the get-go. So it's like, guys, don't forget that. So, so when it came to designing a lot of the planning and so forth, the building kind of led us to a lot of the kind of design solutions and so forth. Like where, if you look at the kind of perimeter of the building, it kind of juts out and so forth. And there's turrets which lend themselves to being meeting rooms. So that goes, okay, well, if that's got to be a meeting room, adjacent to that's got to be kind of ideally should be a workplace environment. And when you're kind of mapping out the kind of areas, if we kind of came halfway between a kind of bay we said, okay, well, let's just extend it a bit so it reaches the end of that bay and looks like it's kind of meant to be. I mean, the biggest challenge was, and when we were mapping out, is putting the wet recovery where the pools are, because obviously you have to sink the pools into the slab. So we were like, and we could have done that on the inside, but that could have just been a recipe for disaster. So we thought, well, look, that needs to go on the outside. So we had that kind of wedge-shaped space at the south there, which was previously in the previous incarnation of the Royal Hall Initiative was a kind of boneyard kind of space. So we kind of put we located the wet recovery there, and then these high performance things the adjacencies are set. So this needs to be next to that, next to the wet recovery should ideally be next to the locker room, so you can kind of walk directly in between the two. Okay, the locker room there, the locker room should be close to the medical should be close to the gym. So all those things kind of led us in. Once we kind of established that the wet recovery needed to wear, on the outside, everything kind of fell into place. And then also at the other end, I mean, that's the kind of football department areas, and then at the other end, we always knew that the entrance was going to be up at the northern end there. So we always made sure that upon entry, we really wanted to kind of wow the person coming in. So we had the great hall, the central hall in the background, and we really wanted to make the kind of entry lobby just really celebrate the building, And then we did, there's that kind of great space there that kind of, really accentuates the volume and so forth. We did these other things like, in the workplace environment. So, there's, for the most part, it's open plan, but there's a few offices and meeting rooms. We clustered them together just so that they were in one spot, just so that we could, maximise the amount of open space, just so that then you've got kind of more space or volume to kind of see the great trusses and the roof and so forth like that. So there was a whole lot of cues that kind of pushed us in the right direction, and we really just kind of, followed what the building was telling us, if that doesn't sound too kind of cliched.
Doesn't sound cliche at all. It sounds very cool, actually. Now, Drew, I've got to ask you, this facility is actually called Sydney Swans HQ and Community Centre. What are some of the spaces that have been designed to cater for community engagement?
So the easiest thing that could have happened here at Royal Hall of Industries was that we as a high-performance team moved in and locked the doors. But we didn't think that honoured the history of the building, nor the commitment that we've hopefully got to enriching lives above and beyond playing footy. So a couple of lead-in thoughts, Barnaby, on that. So firstly, great halls like this were constructed around the start of the 20th century with great civic and community pride. So when this building opened in 1913, its genesis was to be a real spiritual heart, community heart of Sydney. Now, it was and wasn't that over the century, and by the time we had moved in, the building was in significant need of repair. It was only open about 50 days of the year. So to Warwick's point, we wanted to make sure that we honoured that legacy and actually returned this building to its glory, not only moved in, but then opened it up. So our commitment was 365 days of the year. This is going to be both high performance and community, honouring the great history of this facility. So that was number one. Number two, that's easy to say, but how do you bring it to life? So that's point two. And with that in mind, we wanted to identify great partners that could work with us and live with us here at HQ that were aligned to our work as a football club, but do more than just play footy. So some examples of that, the Go Foundation have been a long-term partner of the club, as you know well. So to have Adam and Mick and the team here rent-free with us permanently was a no-brainer. We have Clontarf Foundation as another Indigenous non-profit focused on education and sport, so they moved in. We've got the largest blood bank in the eastern suburbs here, rent-free. And finally, Plate It Forward, you might have heard about, do amazing work bringing First Nation chefs and new arrivals to country and training them up to be amazing chefs, so they moved in. So that was on the community side. And then commercially, we thought, how else can we extend our reach and impact? We wanted to have a commercial gym offering for people that could come and train like a Swan, but obviously not alongside Errol and Chloe and the team. So we partnered with 98 Gym, who are just culturally really well aligned to us. And finally, we had an international standard multi-purpose court that we were building. Warwick referenced the southern end of the facility. There was some space that we could utilise and do something else. And there we've welcomed the Sydney Kings and Flames basketball team, so men's and women's basketball teams. And the spirit there, bringing all of that together, is that we've got culturally strong socially representative groups that span sport, education, entertainment, all in one place. And what a privilege that we could bring that all together under this great building.
It's a very cool vision. Now, Warwick, I need to ask you about some of your partners from Populous's point of view.
Yep.
Populous took care of the design work, but who did you need to work with? Builders, legal, all that sort of stuff?
I think initially we were working closely, apart from the Swans obviously, was APP, the project managers. So Anthony and Ron from there were great to deal with. I've worked with Ron on a few projects previously, so I had a relationship there, and Anthony was amazing. He kind of was just across all the issues, but at the same time gave us our space. And then FDC came aboard, and you're always a bit nervous as an architect, when the contractor comes aboard, just to see how that would be. But they were amazing. They were great. FDC were great. George, in particular George Kavuntis, who we kind of dealt with mainly, and Dylan and Peter Kolak. And I'm sure there's always of others that I've forgotten, but they were really great to deal with, just really kind of proactive. I mean, I think they saw our vision and really appreciated what we wanted to do. And we would kind of work with them. We were really reasonable in terms of just if we encountered a problem or whatever like that, we would kind of work together to find a compromise. So, and I think it helps when you've got a building like this and the potential and whatever like that. They want to go the extra mile. I mean, it's not just some kind of speculative office block, just down the road and, for a developer or something. This is, they really realised that this was a special building, so went the extra way. And then TTW, who are the structural engineers, and Oricon, that we did the services. I mean, we've worked with them before, we had a good relationship. So collectively, it was a really strong team and a really collaborative team, and I think that kind of shows in the outcomes.
So, on all of that note, you were fairly intimately involved in this project from the start. How long has it been since you've been in Swans HQ, and how did you feel when you walked in today?
I try and come in, I kind of average, 4 or 5 times a year. I just find myself in Sydney kind of every 3 months, and I try and kind of find myself coming in. I love coming in. It's great. It's just kind of great seeing the activity and so forth, and the Swans are so welcoming. So, usually if I've got an opportunity, I've got a couple of hours to kill, I kind of find, I'll do a beeline to here and just kind of pull up a kind of table in the dining space, which is great. So, and, I was just saying to Drew, I think yesterday, I mean, one of the things that I really like is the LinkedIn posts and seeing all the people all the companies that they come in here having strategy days or whatever. I mean, that's really great. And just seeing some of the photos, you can see people are kind of really engaged and really excited about being there and so forth. I mean, I think I made no reference to that. On one of the posts, there was a classic photo where it was in the boardroom, it was the back of the boardroom, and you could see someone was presenting, giving some type of keynote address with all these kind of bullet points, probably how the company's going to survive the year. And then you could see everyone kind of looking out, kind of watching the, action on the field and so forth. So, stuff like that just kind of makes me smile and so forth. And, and even on game day, seeing the procession now, I mean, that's so amazing, such a unique opportunity and the ability to do that and seeing kind of the smiles on, people from, young kids all the way through to, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of come in also when Tom or Drew have been kind of showing some people around and, kind of old players and so forth, and to see the kind of look of joy and amazement on them really kind of, brings me a kind of degree of joy as well.
An extension to that, Barnaby, really quickly, is the campus is now running probably 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. most days. We're welcoming 2,000 to 2,500 people a week, and that's everyone from an ASX 200 company or a multinational through to a community group that we're in this morning or a school group. So we really want it to be that broad church and tying it back to the original vision of the facility. Secondly, our mantra is we want to try and have as many people ready to do their life's best work. That might be on the field, it might be off the field. Their life's best work might be in front of them, and how can we help them get there? So everyone who walks through our doors, whether a player, staff member, volunteer, board member, corporate partner, visitor, how do we help them do their best work? And so we've been so fortunate to welcome hundreds and hundreds of companies since we opened and have conversations about that. And we learn as much from people that come here as hopefully they do from us.
Yeah, and to Drew's point, I mean, and to one of the earlier questions, I think this redevelopment has really brought a better appreciation of the building. I mean, it was always here and you could always see it from the outside, but it it wasn't really a publicly accessible building. In some ways, you had to kind of pay to get in here if it was an exhibition or so forth. So, and I did it. I did a project up the road, the Rugby AU, and previous to this building, and I would drive past this building all the time, and I didn't even really recognise it. By virtue of the fact of what the Swans have done now, the fact of getting people in and seeing the post, the building has got such a greater level of exposure and appreciation, and that's also one of the other heartening things of the kind of outcomes of this. Is the building is an amazing building, and if it's kind of got a soul, it's really great to see that it's actually got some kind of TLC and is being really appreciated.
It certainly does have a soul, and you talked about people smiling. There's a lot of people smiling around this joint. Now, Drew, there's some really big statistics about Swans HQ. Can you tell us how many electronic screens you have in this place and who provided those?
You're going to check me on my homework here.
I'm counting.
I would say, okay, I'll back up one step and then I'll answer it. So in the spirit of partnership and doing your life's best work, we thought the easiest thing again to do is just to get provider A, B and C to bump in some kit. But we always want everyone to buy into what we're trying to achieve here. So that's everything from black box gym equipment, Novo Fit with the Watt bike. So we wanted them to understand, hey, these are high performance athletes, and how can we work with you to maximize impact for our athletes and staff and your brand? So every element of the building, we wanted to have a true partnership, and an extension of that is, say, Lamazocco with the coffee machine. So we wanted them to understand our vision, get them in, help them then customize an experience. And then through to the technology side, we've got over 100 actual screens. We work with NSC on that. We've got then hundreds and hundreds of Apple and Google devices. And we wanted everything here to feel like people's second home. So 75% of the athletes in our programs, on average, come from interstate. We have people travelling far and wide to come and do their best work here. We wanted everyone to come to HQ to feel like the second home. So part of that experience is actually having technology that is just like your lounge room in your bedroom. So practical examples of that, we've got AirPlay everywhere. We've got technology that looks and feels like Touch ID. We wanted consumer technology woven in so that Warwick can come today, connect to the Wi-Fi. If he wants to AirPlay up to a screen, he can do that. I didn't want people to have degrees in systems engineering, software engineering, just to connect to something. And so often with corporate experiences and my journey in working life, I've seen is they're well-intentioned but overly complex. And so for us, we want to keep it really simple and have that second home philosophy embedded throughout, and hopefully we've achieved that.
I feel like you have, and footballers aren't smart people, so making it as easy as possible is a good idea.
I didn't say that.
Well, I think someone once said to me, putting athletes aside, common sense is not evenly distributed. Okay, so whether you're a staff member, whether you're an athlete, it doesn't matter. I always like to think about everyone on a continuum. Okay, and everyone's got their strengths and areas for development. And I've certainly got lots of areas for development. So I thought if there's one thing I can hopefully help a little bit with is how do we make it as immersive and comfortable for people as possible.
Very good. Now I just need to clarify something. I am a footballer myself, so I can take the mickey out of them and call them not smart. So I wasn't having a go at football players. Now, Drew, one more question. One of the aims at Swans HQ was to foster an enhanced level of connectivity between the players, coaches and staff. Has it achieved that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so props to Warwick and the team that did the original design work, because it's achieved that the flow between zones, I would say, in Swans HQ is elite. And, think about a space just outside us here in the production studio is what we call our campfire, our dining room. And it looks and feels and runs like Pitt Street Mall in the best way. It's very democratic. It is like a great mess hall, and you might have first-year player with a board member. You might have Warwick who's a visitor, or yourself, Barnaby, and Dion and team here. You'll then have a coach come through. You might have media through. So we really want to democratise the spaces. And one of the things that this amazing home has done is, it's increased in a great way transparency between teams, because you can look outside and see everyone. Oh, there's Horse down there, or it might be Scott Gowans and Kate and the women's team. I can see them. Oh, the academy team are just arriving on the field. So the connectedness between spaces, so the flow is great, but secondly, the transparency. You get a really good sense of who's on site. I can connect with them And so that design brief to bring that to life has definitely maximised collaboration between teams. Connectedness is definitely up as well.
Very good. Now, Warwick and Drew, I need to let you know personally that this place feels like the Bloods culture. That connectivity and inclusiveness and the flow is exactly what it feels like. So thank you, Drew and Warwick, for joining me on Everyday Greatness. And it was really lovely having a chat to both of you.
Thanks, Barnaby.
Thanks, Barnaby.
It's been great.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me. And I want to thank the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for the 7th year in a row. Thank you to Look Studio Australia for your technical expertise. Thanks to Facet Digital for your digital marketing services. And to the Sydney Swans for hosting us so graciously at Swans HQ. And thank you all for joining us. We hope you can join us next week, where we'll speak to Managing Director of the ARA Group, Edward Fetterman, and Sydney Swans legend and Managing Director of ARA Indigenous Services, Michael O'Loughlin. We're going to be talking about the ARA First Nations Foundation and the opportunities it provides for Aboriginal Australian children. We hope you can join us for that one. But if you want to find out more, go to the Everyday Greatness page at barnabyhowarth.com.au or follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube or LinkedIn. You can also watch the program this season on Swans TV on YouTube. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you again, Warwick and Drew, for joining me.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Barnaby.